Hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth. I make mom and lifestyle videos, so if you enjoy that kind of content, make sure you subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and hit the bell notification so you don't miss any future videos. I'm mom to a toddler Dominic and this little girl Elaina, who's 3 months old now. Today I'll be sharing Elaina's birth story. I talked about what went on in the days leading up to her birth in my pregnancy update videos, so be sure to check those out if you want to know what went on before. So in this video today, I'll be primarily focusing on just her actual birth. Her bow is still a little bit too big, so sometimes it falls down into her eyes. Her due date was on a Monday, and that came and went. I had a prenatal appointment the Thursday after her due date. I had a membrane sweep at that appointment, and then not the next day, but the day after that. So Friday night, and it was actually Saturday, early in the morning. That's when everything started. So at about 1:30 a.m., I woke up to my water breaking. It was a pretty weird feeling. It basically felt like I was just massively peeing myself. So yeah, that was really fun. I could kind of feel it like starting to break. So I shot out of bed and I said to my husband, "My water's breaking." And then I ran to the bathroom. The master bathroom is actually connected right to our master bedroom, so I didn't have very far to go, but I didn't want any of it to get on the carpet because I knew that would be a mess to clean up. So I went as fast as I could, and I managed to get most of it in the toilet and a little bit like on my pants and underwear and on the floor, but at least that wasn't hard to clean up. It was a pretty good amount of liquid. You hear stories of people thinking that their water broke, but it actually was them peeing themselves or just a lot of liquid that actually isn't amniotic fluid. So it was 1:30, I'd gone to bed around 10:30, and it was way more liquid than I knew could have been in my bladder. So I'm like, I definitely didn't pee myself. I actually happened to have a pH test strip for checking if your water is broken. My doula had given it to me when I was pregnant with Dominic actually, but with Dominic my water broke at the hospital when I was 10 centimeters, just about to start pushing, so we didn't need to test it. The reason why it's important to know if your water has broken before labor starts is because after your water breaks, you have a higher risk of infection, particularly if you don't give birth within the first 24 hours. So your care team will definitely need to know if your water breaks. They'll minimize internal checks, and if it goes too long, you may have to have some kind of induction to minimize your risk of infection. So I used the test strip and immediately turned very dark, which I was pretty sure that was positive. I did a quick Google search just to make sure, and it said that was positive. So I texted a picture of it to my doula, and I said, "This is positive, right?" And I let her know what was going on, and she said, "Yep, that's definitely positive." So our plan was, as soon as I had any signs of labor, either my water breaking or contraction starting, I would take a shower and then head to the hospital. With Dominic, I took a shower in early labor and I really enjoyed that. It was just a nice way for me to be able to relax, get clean, and spend a little bit of time by myself before all the craziness and the new baby. So I took a shower right after that with her. My contractions did start about 5 or 10 minutes after my water broke, so I started timing them. They were kind of inconsistent, but around 5 minutes apart at that point, and very mild, just like period cramps. But I had a relatively fast labor with Dominic. It was only about 7.5 hours for my first birth, so I wanted to get up to the hospital ASAP. Luckily, my mom actually started staying with us on my due date because the plan was for her to watch Dominic when we went to the hospital, and she lives about 45 minutes away, so we decided it would be a good idea for her to start staying with us so she wouldn't have to make the drive up and we could get to the hospital as soon as possible. And we figured I would probably go to labor in the middle of the night. That way, if she was already staying with us, she wouldn't have to get up and get everything going in the middle of the night either. After I was done in the shower, we finished packing up the car and headed out. It was about 2:30 when we left the house, and so we got to the hospital about 15 minutes later. We went through a check-in, and I went to triage, and I was sitting down most of this time, so that actually made my contractions space out further. They were about 15 minutes apart at that point, and still very mild. The whole time through this and through when I was sitting in triage, I was having amniotic fluid still leak out. It was really weird and just a gross feeling. That didn't happen with Dominic. I wasn't leaking anything since my water hadn't broken. So the leaking feeling of the amniotic fluid was just really weird. I give it 0 stars. Now with my hospital and the COVID restrictions, luckily I was still allowed to have one doula. They considered doulas essential workers, and also a support person, which for me was my husband. The doulas weren't allowed to come into triage though. They had to wait to come in until I was in the labor and delivery room, but I was texting them, letting them know what was going on. Actually, the doula that I have has a team. She has a couple other doulas that work with her. The main doula has other things going on that day, so it was the secondary doula, but I love the whole team, so I was happy to have her. So I was checked in triage, and I was only around 2 to 3 centimeters dilated. At that point, I was kind of thinking that it might actually be a long day. If my contractions didn't start to pick up, it could take a while. But alas, that was not the case. So I got to the labor and delivery room around 4. There was a bit of signing paperwork, and then we had to get the monitors hooked up for her heartbeat and for contractions, and then the nurses put in a hep lock in case I needed anything from the IV. So once all that was done, I started just walking and pacing around the room. For me, I do best with contractions if I'm standing up and walking before they get super painful. Moving around is actually really good while you're in labor to help move the baby down and keep things going. That's one of the reasons I didn't want to get an epidural, because if you get an epidural, you pretty much have to stay in the bed, and that can actually slow things down a bit. So I was walking around, and that's when contractions just immediately started picking up, and they were coming on every couple of minutes, and definitely starting to get more painful. Right when things kind of started to pick up, that's when my midwife came in. It was actually one of the midwives on call, and I had not met her yet, but she was amazing. I'm really glad that I got her. She was really calm, just kind of talked me through everything and asked what I wanted to do as well. My doula got there around 5 a.m. and that's around when I started to throw up. The way my hospital is set up, they have rooms that are geared toward people that want to have an unmedicated birth. It's almost a little bit like a birth center. They have really nice tubs in those rooms, and I had wanted to labor in the tub. So a little bit after 5, I was starting to feel like I might want to get in the tub soon. And my midwife wanted to check me because if you go in the tub too early, that can slow things down. So you don't want to get in there too early. My doula took notes as well, so I have some timestamps. So at 5:18, I was dilated to 7 centimeters already. So that was plenty dilated. Generally, you wouldn't want to get into the tub any earlier than about 5 or 6 centimeters. So we started filling up the tub. I threw up a couple more times. I actually had some contractions that were back to back with not any break at all in between. That's what they consider transition, and it is pretty rough. Your body is just really opening up, and the contractions get really intense. So when the tub was about halfway full, I started to get the urge to push. This baby did not want me to get in the tub. Dominic also was born too fast after we got to the hospital to let me get into the tub, even though I had a tub room with him as well. So these babies just do not want me to labor in the tub. At that point, she started having some heart decelerations. So something that can help with that is laying on your right side. So my midwife asked me to get on the bed and lay on my right side, and that did help. Unfortunately, with Dominic, that's where things got crazy because his heart rate was decelerating and not going back up. If you want to hear his birth story, I will put a link to that in the cards and in the description below. So since I was starting to feel the urge to push, the midwife checked me again. That was about 5:30, so about 12 minutes. I was dilated to 10 centimeters. So going from 7 centimeters to 10 in 12 minutes, that's really intense. So I started pushing. It felt like it was around 7 or 8 pushes altogether. I started feeling what they call the ring of fire, which is baby crowning, and it just feels really intense, really much, and a lot of burning. I remember the midwife telling me to slow down at that point and take some easy pushes, and that helps you not tear so much. So a couple more easy pushes, and she was born. Altogether, it was about 10 minutes of pushing, so she was born at 5:40. I really only had about an hour and a half of even painful contractions. She did have the umbilical cord wrapped around her neck one time, so as soon as she was born, the midwife unwrapped the cord around her neck and then gave her right to me. She started crying within seconds, and she wanted to nurse almost right away. I was definitely very emotional when she was born, just so glad to meet my baby that I've been waiting for 9 long months to meet. She was 6 pounds, 7 ounces when she was born, so still really on the small side, especially for being 5 days late. I ended up having a 2nd degree tear. Now with Dominic, I had a 3.75 degree tear, so it was way better than that. I needed some stitches, so the midwife just used a local anesthetic for that, and she just did that while I was cuddling with Elaina and getting all those newborn snuggles, and she actually started to nurse after a few minutes. It's pretty standard to be given Pitocin through your IV after you have a baby because that can help your uterus shrink down faster so you don't get excessive bleeding. But the uterus shrinking so fast can be pretty painful. It's called like afterbirth pains or afterbirth contractions. I had those relatively bad with Dominic because they didn't tell me, but I'm almost positive that they gave me Pitocin. But this time they checked my bleeding and they said my bleeding looked fine, and so I requested not to have Pitocin unless the bleeding was bad enough that I would need it. So they didn't give me Pitocin, and I actually think my afterbirth contractions were not as bad as they were with Dominic. And that's something that typically the more babies you have, the worse it is. So I was glad that that was actually a bit better. I'm pretty sure not having the Pitocin really helped. Even though her birth was very fast and very intense, I actually felt like it was really peaceful just because of the midwife talking me through everything, and we had low lights, we had a calm atmosphere, and of course we didn't really have anything dangerous going on for baby or for me. So I I just felt like this was such a peaceful birth, and with not having nearly as severe of a tear, I was able to have a much better recovery and much better time in the hospital after as well. I just felt like it was a night and day difference between when Dominic was born and when she was born. I kind of feel like my birth with Dominic was somewhat traumatic, and with Elena's birth, I just really felt like this was what birth is supposed to be like. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe.